Homeless children wandering the streets, starving, were forced to sneak into the house of a witch rumored to eat people, just to find something to eat. At first, they only meant to steal a little food and slip away, but instead they were caught red-handed. To their surprise, though, the witch turned out to be a gentle, kind-hearted young woman. Her name was Hazel. After a tragic drowning accident, she had been transported into another world and turned into the wicked witch from a fairy tale. To adapt to her new life, she tried everything she could think of, even baking her own gingerbread man cookies by hand. But it was exactly because she handed out cookies to visitors that the rumor spread everywhere. The Witch of the Dark Forest baked human flesh. From then on, Hazel was branded a man-eating witch and no one dared come anywhere near her. After days of careful thought, Hazel decided to remodel her house into an adorable candy cottage. She hoped that doing so would erase everyone's prejudice against her. But reality was nothing like her dreams. No one cared to give it a second thought, and people still shrank back in fear whenever they saw her. From then on, Hazel's life became unbearably lonely. She could only cast little spells on her cookies to entertain herself and ease the loneliness. Luckily, the previous owner of this body had once used a forbidden soul swap spell, leaving behind a cat and dog whose souls had been switched with each other. The kitten was named Daisy, but carried the soul of a puppy. The puppy, Reddy, carried the soul of a kitten instead. Her peaceful, uneventful days finally came to an end today. Hazel discovered 2 children sneaking around outside her window trying to steal food. The boy hadn't had a proper meal in so long that he wolfed the food down until he was moved to tears. But his older sister quickly clamped a hand over his mouth. "Shh! Quiet down, this is the house of the man-eating witch." Hazel looked at the 2 adorable children before her and quietly guessed they might be the protagonists of the novel. In her past life, besides working as a kindergarten teacher, Hazel had a little-known side job. She worked part-time as an illustrator. Back when she happily drew the witch character, she never imagined she'd one day be transported into that very character, and even run into the story's 2 main leads face-to-face. Feeling playful, she used magic to lift the 2 children into the air, making them jump in surprise. No matter what, you 2 shouldn't call someone you've just met a man-eating witch, don't you think? The girl bravely stepped forward to shield her little brother. "Put us down right now, do you even know who we are?" The boy, meanwhile, looked at Hazel timidly and mumbled in a tiny voice, "Please don't eat me. My meat's no good anyway." The sight of him still clutching his cookie with both hands left Hazel not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "So, you 2 ate my house, don't you think you should say thank you? But a naughty child who doesn't know how to say thank you will be punished, you know." The girl panicked and instinctively hugged her brother tight. When she saw Hazel pick up a fork, the girl went pale with fear. Seeing the 2 of them trembling like leaves, Hazel decided to stop teasing them. "So here's the deal. I'll give you 2 choices. 1, you become my dinner today. 2, you sit down and have cake with me." The moment they saw the tempting cake, both children's eyes lit up. But they still tried to act tough on the outside. You think we're that easy to fool? And yet, just a little while later, the 2 siblings were sitting obediently at the table. Hazel brought out a freshly baked carrot cake. The children immediately scrunched up their faces. "We don't like carrots." With the skills of a seasoned kindergarten teacher, Hazel knew exactly how to win kids over. She used magic to bring a little cookie boy to life and had him trot right up to the carrot. "The noble gentleman says carrots taste amazing, you know." So the 2 children eagerly dug in, gobbling it all up. The girl introduced herself as Luna, age 7, and her little brother as Luca, age 5. And both of them had been abandoned by their own birth parents. This suddenly brought back memories of Hazel's own hard childhood. She couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow looking at the 2 children before her. How could anyone be so heartless as to abandon such adorable children? Even not knowing for certain whether they were truly the protagonists, and even knowing she might someday be killed off by them. For now, all she wanted was to be a kind, gentle witch and pour all her love into taking care of them. After finishing off the cake, Luna timidly asked Hazel, "Are you planning to fatten us up before eating us? Are these cookies made from human flesh too?" Hazel quickly changed the subject and hurried the kids off to take a bath. "So you're going to wash us clean before roasting us, right?" Hazel burst out laughing. "Have you 2 ever seen anyone dress a roast chicken in clothes before?" To her surprise, Luna innocently replied that they'd never even gotten to eat roast chicken before. Hazel felt a pang of sympathy, assuming they must have come from a poor family. She gently stroked their heads to comfort them, then sent the two off to bed. A little while later, the siblings lay peacefully in the soft, cozy bed. The little brother whispered, "That witch doesn't seem so scary after all, does she, sis?" Standing outside the door, Hazel overheard the children's conversation. After telling them to sleep well, she happily walked away. Oh, having children to keep her company in this lonely life? It really did feel wonderful. Early the next morning, Luna grimaced when she saw that her little brother Luca had wet the bed again. She crept outside to scope out the situation, wondering whether this was her chance to make a run for it. The moment she stepped outside, she spotted Hazel hiding behind a tree by the house. Up ahead, two people seemed to be gossiping about something happening in the village. Word is the Grand Duke has lost his mind. Hazel vaguely recalled that there was only one Grand Duke in this world. He had inherited the title after his parents passed away young, and thanks to his outstanding abilities, he had never been shaken by war. Just then, the two people up ahead noticed Hazel standing behind them. They panicked instantly. "The man-eating witch is right behind us." "Run!" Hazel hurried forward to explain it was all just a baseless rumor, but no one stayed to hear her out. Inside the house, Luna had witnessed the whole thing. She decided not to run away after all, and instead ran to call Hazel back. "Luca accidentally wet the bed. Could you help us out?" The moment she went upstairs, she found the little one sniffling and mumbling an apology through hiccups. "I'm sorry, I'm 5 and I still wet the bed. That's just a puddle left by a water spirit, I swear. He's probably just tense from sleeping somewhere unfamiliar." Luca mumbled in his defense that it was because Lulu wasn't here. But his sister exposed him without mercy. "You wet the bed even with Lulu around." Lulu was the stuffed rabbit from their old home. Hazel thought to herself that she could use a teleportation spell to bring the rabbit back for him. But Luna immediately clapped a hand over her brother's mouth. "We don't have a home. Our house burned down, that's why we had to come here." Hearing that, Hazel felt an odd unease, like something wasn't quite right. But she didn't press further and went off to hang the laundry instead. To her surprise, little Luca trailed along after her. "You're not mad at us, are you? You won't eat me, right?" Hazel teased him, saying that later she'd take him mushroom picking in the forest and that she wouldn't be catching little ones today. Hearing that only made the boy shake even more. Once the laundry was done, the two little ones tagged along behind Hazel into the forest. "You two go over there and pick me 10 mushrooms, okay?" The children were thrilled, eyes wide and mouths agape as they looked all around. This was the first time they'd ever seen mushrooms growing straight from the ground. Back home, the siblings had always been locked up inside. Hazel never imagined the children's circumstances could be this pitiful. Locking children up inside the house, isn't that abuse? No matter how far their parents came looking for them, she was determined never to let those people take the children away. So she decided that tomorrow she'd take the two of them down to the village. They'd get to eat delicious food and even watch a street performance. She'd buy them beautiful new clothes and let them experience everything they'd never gotten to do before. In the middle of the fun, Luca let something slip. "If only our big brother were here to play with us too. That would be so nice." Sure enough, the story about their house burning down had just been a lie. Just how dire must their situation have been for someone to abandon two such tiny children? But the moment they took the kids out for the first time, they nearly lost one of them. Hazel took the children into the village, and the very first thing she did was find a clothing shop. Normally, all her own clothes were homemade, and if she needed something lengthened, the little spirits would sew it for her. But for the children to live safely here in the long run, she needed to build good relationships with the villagers. Despite the shop clerk's unwelcoming, sour attitude, Hazel stayed warm and full of goodwill. "I'd like to buy some clothes and shoes for the children. Money is no issue." Seeing the two children, the clerk whispered to the person beside him. They assumed the kids had been kidnapped and thought about refusing to sell, but on second thought, they were afraid Hazel might turn them into frogs. Having caught the whole exchange, Luna's eyes went wide with anger. "I can't hold it in anymore. I'm extremely annoyed right now. How could you people be so rude to a customer?" Seeing the little firecracker about to explode, Hazel hurriedly pulled Luna away. The moment they stepped outside, an old woman running the shop next door called out to them. "I can see these children are clean and healthy, with rosy, glowing cheeks. You don't look like a bad person to me at all." With that, the old woman happily picked out clothes for the children. A little while later, the three of them headed home loaded down with bags. Luna kept wondering how on earth a witch could have so much money to spend. Truthfully, even Hazel herself didn't quite know how to explain being secretly loaded. When she'd first arrived in this house, she'd discovered a basement piled high with mountains of gleaming gold coins. She'd never intended to touch that money, but now there were more mouths to feed at home. Lost in thought, she overheard the villagers behind her buzzing with gossip. Apparently, the Grand Duke had just issued a wanted notice with an enormous reward. Seeing the notice about the missing young lord and lady, Hazel's first instinct was to want to help. She was about to ask a passerby what the two children looked like when Luna suddenly distracted her. "That rabbit looks just like Lulu." The moment Hazel took Luca over to look, she turned around and Luna was nowhere to be seen. Hazel panicked instantly. Could someone really be bold enough to kidnap a witch's child in broad daylight? But before she'd taken more than a few steps, she found Luna busy tearing up a missing child flyer. Caught in the act, Luna explained sheepishly, I wanted to draw, but I couldn't find any paper, so I tore this up instead." Naive as ever, Hazel fell for it completely. "Next time, warn me first, okay?" "All right then, let's go buy some paper and crayons." Walking through the village, everyone was buzzing about the two missing children, guessing wildly about what happened. Kidnapped by the royal family. Meanwhile, the Grand Duke sat staring blankly at a portrait of the three siblings. "Lulu, where on earth did your owner go? If something happens to those two, what am I supposed to do?" Just then, a flustered knight came rushing in to report. "My lord, someone spotted two children matching their exact description at a clothing shop near the dark forest." They said the two children were named Luna and Luca. Meanwhile, Hazel had no idea what kind of trouble was about to come crashing down the next day. After leading the two children around all day, the three of them finally made it back home. She used to complain that the days went by far too quickly, but now she felt like there was never enough time. Lost in thought, Luca pushed open the living room door and dove straight into Hazel's lap. Sis, I'm scared." The moment he finished speaking, Hazel saw Luna standing right behind him. Hazel gently stroked Luna's head. "This little girl really is remarkably tough. She's every bit the responsible big sister. Taking care of a little brother like this must be so hard. If it were me at such a young age, with no home to shelter me, no good food to eat, and no adult by my side, I probably would have been sobbing my heart out a long time ago." Hazel, aching with sympathy, wrapped her arms around both children and pulled them close. "From now on, just leave the grown-up matters to me, okay?" She truly wished they could just keep living together like this forever. If only the children's father would never come looking for them. The next morning, Hazel had barely woken up when she heard frantic pounding on the door. The moment the door swung open, a cold blade thrust straight toward her. The young woman had simply taken in two children she found near her home, and it very nearly cost her her life. Hazel opened the door to find the Grand Duke standing there, killing intent radiating off him. "I will execute you for the crime of kidnapping." Fortunately, the two children woke up at just the right moment. Seeing this, Luna panicked and rushed to stop her brother's violent outburst. It was only then that Hazel realized, in stunned disbelief, that the man in front of her was the Grand Duke. And the two children were none other than the missing young lord and lady. No wonder their reactions had seemed so strange before. Now everything finally made sense. The two children also ran up and clung tightly to their brother's leg. "If you kill Sister Hazel, I'll starve myself forever. I'll never eat carrots again either." Hearing that, the Grand Duke froze in place. Wait, these two have never once been willing to eat carrots before. With that, he noticed the carrot cake sitting on the table behind them. He knew all too well just how much his siblings despised carrots. Instantly, his suspicious gaze locked onto the infamous witch before him. She must have done something to them. This is something even the royal chefs haven't managed to pull off in years. The knight standing behind him chimed in as well, suspecting the children had been brainwashed. After all, there had always been rumors about witches using dark magic. But what infuriated Hazel most of all was the aide brandishing his sword right in front of the children. She'd meant to turn the blade into a small, harmless creature with magic, only to discover the blade was coated in holy power. Seeing that Hazel wouldn't answer, the domineering Grand Duke suddenly bellowed, "I asked you what you did to them." The loud shout startled little Luca, who burst into tears. To prove her innocence, Hazel wanted the Grand Duke to taste the cake himself. Instead, he ordered a knight to take the cake away for testing, wanting to check whether it had been laced with some suspicious substance. Thinking about all the effort she and the children had put into making that cake, only for it to be treated as something filthy, made Hazel furious. I've heard that you lock these adorable children up and abuse them. I absolutely will not let you take them away. You'll only cage them up again. Unless you promise me you'll become a proper guardian. But the Grand Duke only sneered, his eyes full of contempt. A man-eating witch daring to lecture me on being a proper guardian? Once I find the evidence, I will execute you without fail. That remark only made the children react even more fiercely. They tugged at their brother's sleeve, shouting that Hazel was not a bad person. They even insisted that she come along to the Duke's estate, declaring they wouldn't go home otherwise. Watching the two children cry and plead, Hazel felt her heart ache, but in the end, that was still their home. So she gently soothed them, promising to write letters to them and telling them to ask someone else to read any words they didn't know. The two little ones finally climbed into the carriage, still sniffling. Big brother, you have to promise us you won't kill Sister Hazel, okay? And you should thank her, too, for taking care of us. Didn't you always teach us to never forget to say thank you? So the Duke, grumbling all the while, reluctantly forced out a word of thanks to Hazel. Deep down, though, he still firmly believed she had used dark magic to manipulate the children. Hazel stared blankly after the carriage as it disappeared from view, reliving the warm days she'd just spent with the two children. She couldn't hold back the tears welling up in her eyes. A few days later, at the Duke's estate, Luna and Luca were dressed and ready, everything prepared. The instant their sister gave the signal, the two siblings took off running full speed ahead. They absolutely had to sneak onto the carriage before anyone noticed. Seeing the servants approaching, the two little ones hid inside the carriage, holding their breath in fear, not even daring to breathe hard. Hearing the servants call out that they were ready to depart, the two of them were overjoyed. We did it. Now we can go find Hazel. But the very next second, their brother coldly pulled back the curtain. You're not going anywhere. Did you two really think you'd fall for the same trick as last time? The two siblings had put so much careful planning into escaping their strict brother, only to be caught before the carriage had even started moving. With that same watchful look in his eyes, how could they ever fool him again? Kiemtra. The Duke then grabbed the two troublemakers by the collar and hauled them straight back to the mansion. He also sternly instructed the servants that from now on, every carriage and every piece of luggage leaving the estate had to be thoroughly searched and inspected. The two little ones were already devastated their escape plan had failed, and then at dinner, even a single piece of chocolate was flatly denied to them. The Duke was already at his wits' end dealing with these two troublesome siblings. He'd had to rack his brain fending off the royal family's scheming plots. And on top of that, he had to keep a close eye on these mischievous kids every single moment, because no one knew when those vicious claws might suddenly strike them down. Just then, the chef stood hesitating, unsure whether to bring that particular dish to the table. He honestly couldn't believe the young master and mistress actually liked this dish. Just as expected, the moment the two little ones saw the dish, their eyes went wide with astonishment. It was the very beef and carrot stew that Sister Hazel always used to make. What amazed everyone even more was that the children genuinely, willingly wolfed down every piece of carrot in it. The chef was just about to tear up from being so moved, when Luna started chewing with her mouth full, clearly about to spit the carrot right back out. Ugh, why does this carrot smell exactly like the dirt in our backyard? Luca deflated too, voice wobbling. I want the carrot cake Sister Hazel makes. Naturally, their brother the Duke immediately shut down the boy's request. Furious, Luna grabbed her little brother's hand and dragged him out of the dining room. The two siblings stormed back to their room and launched a hunger strike in protest. They declared flatly that they wouldn't come out unless their nanny was brought to them. But didn't the two of them chase off every nanny who'd ever come before? Not those nannies, we want you to bring Sister Hazel here. The Duke tore at his hair, utterly baffled as to what spell that witch had cast on them. The children had always treated nannies like mortal enemies, yet now they were throwing a fit demanding that very woman come take care of them. And on top of that, they dared compare her to their own brother. I already told you, Sister Hazel is a good person. Look at us. Do you see a single bite mark anywhere? Luca clutched tightly at his brother's sleeve. Big brother, please, let's go find Sister Hazel together. But in the end, all they got was their brother's cold, unyielding shake of the head. Just then, a knight rushed in breathlessly to report that the royal palace had just issued a decree. The Duke had no choice but to leave first. Given this order, it seemed a campaign to the front lines was now unavoidable. As the eldest son of the family, and the only one able to shield and protect his siblings, he always forced himself to be their unshakable pillar of support. And yet, every once in a while, he too felt utterly worn down and exhausted. Elsewhere, ever since the children left, Hazel had gone back to her lonely, solitary life. A few days earlier, she'd quietly gathered news about how the two children were doing. She'd secretly sent the cats and dogs over to gather information, and discovered the estate over there was incredibly vast and magnificent. The food and drink were overflowing with delicacies, and the children were living far more comfortably there than they ever had with her. After all, no one in their right mind would hand their own children over to a witch to raise. Suddenly there came a knock at the door. She went to answer it, and to her surprise, standing there was none other than the Duke himself. It turned out the decree delivered earlier was an order to march off to war. He'd lost count of how many times he'd had to head off to battle this year. Every single time was a brush with death, and making it back alive was never easy. And yet, the thing that weighed on his mind the most, the thing he couldn't let go of, was his two young siblings. Fortunately, the carrot cake he'd sent off for testing earlier had turned out to be completely harmless. Even though there had once been terrifying rumors about her, word was that a few years ago the witch's whole demeanor had completely changed. From that point on, all her cruel behavior had stopped. Could it be that the once wicked witch now genuinely wanted to care for the children with all her heart? To settle the doubts in his mind, the Grand Duke personally went to Hazel's cottage. The pacing footprints outside were proof enough of just how long he'd hesitated. "Miss Hazel, do you have a moment to spare?" Hazel knew full well he must have come for a reason, but she kept remembering how he'd never once trusted her before. So she puffed out her cheeks in irritation and said she was busy, since she still had to take the cats and dogs mushroom picking. To her surprise, the Grand Duke simply trailed along behind her the entire way. Hazel tried her best to stay cold and distant. After all, according to everything the children had told her, the Grand Duke was supposed to be some kind of abusive tyrant. Just then, while they were out picking mushrooms, a massive black bear suddenly appeared from behind, and without a word, charged straight at them. To protect the two beloved children, while being chased by the brown bear, Hazel used magic to knock a beehive down from a tree. That was enough to fend off the bear, but unfortunately, on the way back it suddenly began pouring rain. The two of them had no choice but to duck into a nearby cave to take shelter. The Grand Duke was intensely curious how Hazel had managed to win the children over so completely. Beyond that, he still had a whole list of other questions on his mind. How could someone change so completely overnight? What made you suddenly want to become a kind, gentle witch? Hazel explained that a few years back, she'd survived a near-fatal illness, and afterward, she'd come to regret the way she used to live. Clearly, an excuse that vague was never going to be enough to convince the Grand Duke. And in fact, he had once falsely accused Hazel of practicing dark magic. Hazel could never have dreamed that the Grand Duke would actually open his mouth to apologize. Could it be he had some favor he wanted to ask of her? "I heard you've been abusing the children. No one would ever want to help someone who abuses children. The kids kept saying they'd been locked up inside the house all the time. I did that because it's very dangerous out there." The Grand Duke hurried to explain. The estate has hundreds of rooms and dozens of gardens. Living in a place that vast, how could that possibly count as being imprisoned? But still, even noble children deserve to go out and experience the world, don't they? Do you have any idea how much they love running wild through the forest? What's more, I heard it was you, the Grand Duke himself, who abandoned them. The Grand Duke never imagined the children thought of him that way. But thinking it over, those words weren't entirely wrong either. Year after year, he was constantly away carrying out duties assigned by the royal family, spending far more time away from home than in it. It made sense that the children would misunderstand and feel abandoned. They're still so young, how could they possibly understand the burdens of an adult? All I want is for their safety to come first. Hearing this, Hazel finally understood. She too had misjudged the Grand Duke all along. In truth, he loved his siblings deeply, and was nowhere near the bad person she'd assumed. "While I'm away on campaign, could you come stay and act as the children's nanny for a while?" Hazel never expected this was the favor he wanted to ask. Without a word, she nodded in agreement right away. The very next moment, she took his hand and led him straight toward the mansion where the children were staying. The instant she put on the uniform, Hazel suddenly felt as though she'd truly become a servant of the Duke's household. Still, the living conditions here were, without a doubt, far better than in the countryside. No sooner had she set foot inside than she was called down to the kitchen. The mansion was so enormous she ended up getting lost. Luckily, she ran into a knight along the way and asked him for directions. That said, the knight's attitude was every bit as unpleasant as ever. Meanwhile, the head chef had already received word from the Grand Duke. Tonight's dinner menu needed the new nanny's approval. Hazel suggested a dish, something like a beef stew, basically taking all your favorite ingredients and stewing them together. If you know so much about cooking, then go on over there and make it yourself. With only 20 short minutes to work with, Hazel still decided to roll up her sleeves and give it a try. Under everyone's astonished gaze, she used magic to conjure the ingredients out of thin air. All right, let's start getting dinner ready. A little while later, the two children shuffled into the dining room looking gloomy, their brother beside them. Hazel could tell the atmosphere between them was heavy and tense, nothing like a normal mealtime at all. She had no idea when she'd finally get the chance to step out and greet the children properly. What's more, every single dish laid out on the table looked absolutely mouthwatering. What surprised everyone was that this was the first time the Grand Duke had ever touched one of Hazel's dishes. He then had the food portioned out and served to Luna and Luca. The two children took one bite and immediately clamored for more. Hidden behind the door, Hazel smiled to herself with quiet pride. Eyes wide with amazement, Luna looked up at the head chef. It's been so long since I've had a meal this delicious. Thank you, miss, but I'm not the one who made that dish. And then it was time to serve dessert. One glance was all it took for Luna to recognize the little cookie boy sitting right there on the dessert plate. She jumped up excitedly, craning her neck toward the door. The two little sweethearts had finally been reunited with the Hazel they'd been missing day and night. But just at that moment, the Grand Duke spoke up. Luna, Luca, you two haven't finished your main course yet. If you're not back in your seats in 10 seconds, no dessert for either of you. Fortunately, from then on, she was able to stay by the children's side. And the very first lesson the two children learned was how to grow carrots. After dinner, Hazel, who'd been busy all day long, finally got a moment to rest. Suddenly, she heard strange noises coming from inside a room. Hazel flung the door open in alarm, only to find the two little ones already sitting obediently on her bed. "Can we sleep here tonight, miss?" Faced with the two children's shining, hopeful eyes. Of course, Hazel nodded yes without hesitation. The bed here was plenty big anyway, more than enough room for all three of them to sleep comfortably. The moment they lay down on the mattress, the children began chattering excitedly about how sad they'd felt being away from Hazel, saying they'd even thought about going to find her themselves. But Big Brother kept forbidding it. "This is great. Now we won't have to sneak around trying to run off anymore. Because Hazel's moved into our house now, right, miss?" Hearing those innocent words, Hazel felt her heart grow heavy. She truly didn't know how to tell the children that she could only stay here until the Grand Duke's campaign was over. Thinking about that, she decided she'd simply cherish every happy moment they had right now. But while the three of them slept soundly, wrapped in each other's arms, they had no idea that chaos had already broken out outside. The Grand Duke was leading a search party, frantically scouring the grounds in the middle of the night after discovering his brother and sister had vanished from their room. It wasn't until much later that they finally found the two little ones fast asleep in Hazel's room. Well, a nanny sharing a bed with nobility was already questionable enough. But on top of that, there was a puppy and a kitten curled up on the bed too. He immediately issued a new rule. From now on, the children were required to sleep in their own rooms. He'd expected Hazel to object fiercely, but instead she signed off on it in one quick stroke, looking utterly delighted. The Grand Duke suddenly felt uneasy, as if he'd just walked straight into some kind of trap. And sure enough, he then heard Hazel say, "Would you allow me to clear a small plot of land to farm? Right now, the children's lessons are far too dry and rigid. At their age, learning through play is the best method there is. Growing and harvesting their own vegetables by hand will definitely make eating them so much more satisfying." The Grand Duke, at a loss for words, reluctantly picked up his pen and signed the permission. The very next morning, Hazel had already dressed the two little ones neatly. "Today, you two are going to build up your strength by doing some farming with me." Ironically, the idea met with fierce objection from the knight. If you want to build strength, you should be out on the training grounds practicing swordsmanship, not farming. But in the end, the knight had no choice but to surrender obediently under the children's withering glares. The moment they reached the field, Luna and Luca eagerly threw themselves into sowing seeds and planting. Hazel calmly explained that knowledge has no hierarchy of noble or humble. Through gardening, the children could come to understand the hardships and daily lives of the people living in the territory. It was a valuable hands-on experience that no amount of rigid classroom theory could ever provide. After a long stretch of hard work, hands and feet caked in mud, the vegetables were finally all planted. The little ones started bouncing with excitement, too thrilled to wait, begging to eat the vegetables they'd grown with their own hands right then and there. Just then, Hazel noticed that Luca's stuffed rabbit Lulu had gotten completely filthy. She couldn't help but wonder why the boy never let her wash it clean. Seeing dusk approaching, Hazel pulled out the sandwiches she'd prepared earlier and handed one to the knight. But he just stared blankly at the food without any reaction at all. "Being picky again, Daniel? This is seriously amazing, you know?" Hearing the children say that, the knight hesitantly took a bite. Oh wow, just like the kids said, the flavor was incredible. While everyone was eating and chatting merrily, the Grand Duke suddenly appeared. Seeing him, Hazel invited him to join them, since as it happened, there was one sandwich left over in the basket. Just as the Grand Duke reached out to take it, the two little ones darted in first, begging for more. And so all he could do was watch helplessly as the last sandwich slipped right out of his reach. Without another word, he swiftly snatched the half-eaten sandwich right out of the knight's hand instead. He left the poor knight frozen in place, forced to swallow his frustration without daring to say a word. The Grand Duke himself couldn't quite understand why his mind was suddenly filled with nothing but thoughts of food. By now, the countdown to his departure for the front had shrunk to just 3 days. Under the knight's watchful, wary gaze over this whole stretch of time, he noticed that not only had Hazel done nothing suspicious, she had even spent her own money buying countless gifts for the children. It was only then that the Grand Duke suddenly remembered he'd once forced Hazel to accept a sum of money as payment. He never imagined that the moment his back was turned, she'd have spent every last coin of it on the two children. What's more, apparently even the head chef had become a wholehearted admirer of Hazel's cooking skills. Even so, the knight kept urging him not to let himself be fooled by the witch's gentle, kind-hearted appearance. The Grand Duke just laughed it off dismissively. Ridiculous, as if I'd ever be that easily swayed. And yet, at that very moment, his mind kept drifting to nothing but images of a ham, cheese, and fried egg sandwich, rich and buttery. His craving grew so intense it froze his thoughts completely. Right at that moment, Hazel knocked and stepped in timidly. I just wanted to give you a small gift." Back to Luca, a child who had only just turned 5. The one thing the boy longed to hold on to more than anything was that faint trace of warmth still carrying his mother's scent. While farming that afternoon, Hazel had noticed that Luca's stuffed rabbit Lulu had gotten completely filthy. So she planned to sneak in a quick wash of the little rabbit for him that night while they bathed. So she suggested to Luca that they bring Lulu along to bathe today. To her surprise, the boy panicked instantly. "No way, Lulu smells like Mom, you can't wash that away." That innocent remark suddenly brought back memories of Hazel's own childhood. Her mother had passed away for good when she was only in 2nd grade. Before she left, she'd filled an entire refrigerator with food. But the little girl she'd once been had clung to it so tightly that she never dared eat any of it, even after it had all gone bad. That gnawing longing for a mother. Hazel understood it completely. Luna and Luca right now were only about the same age as kindergartners. These two children must miss their mother terribly. So she gave up on the idea of washing Lulu. It was Luca's one and only keepsake, after all. But she could still make up for some of the love and warmth missing from their parents. "Whatever you two want, just tell me straight. Deal?" The moment she finished speaking, Luca immediately came up with an idea, and Hazel promised firmly that she'd make it happen the very next day. The next day, she brought the two still sleepy children to the breakfast table. The Grand Duke, as always, ate quietly. Hazel's cooking today gave off a warmth like a fireplace glowing in the dead of winter. And yet, the atmosphere felt strangely off. The two children weren't just unusually well-behaved, they kept staring intently at him. Normally, they'd have been hollering and chattering by now, dropping their forks and spoons with a clatter more than once. It wasn't until he lifted his cup of water again that he finally noticed. Hazel, standing nearby, was also gesturing for them to be quiet. The Grand Duke had no idea what the two of them were up to, but he deliberately ate some cabbage anyway, just to see if the kids would follow suit. Sure enough, seeing this, the two little ones stared in wide-eyed astonishment. And then, to his surprise, both of them shut their eyes and swallowed a bite of cabbage whole. Luna immediately shouted out, "I win!" The reaction left the Grand Duke baffled. Win at what exactly? And on top of that, Hazel stood there clapping enthusiastically. What in the world is going on here? He finally asked, only then realizing the children had been playing a game of copying their big brother. Hazel explained with a small smile that children often watch and learn table manners from the adults around them. Most importantly, the Grand Duke's own table manners happened to be flawless. Hearing the flattery, he immediately puffed up with pride. Well, there really is no finer role model than myself. So then, tonight's reward will be a bedtime fairy tale for you two. How does that sound? Aren't you leaving tomorrow? Hazel reminded him. Besides, you really ought to ask the children what they actually want. Hearing that, the Grand Duke obediently walked over to the table and cleared his throat. So, are you two nice and full now? Now then, let's figure out today's winner. First, Luna. Today you bravely ate something you don't like. Truly a shining example for every noble in the Empire. And Luca? Today you didn't drop your fork even once, and you even bravely tried something you hate. It's honestly too close to call, so today you're both winners. So what reward would you two like? But mind you, asking for chocolate, sleeping in, or skipping lessons is off the table. What the Grand Duke never expected was just how simple and how heartbreakingly modest the children's request would be. All they wanted was to play with their big brother. They didn't even ask to go to some extravagant amusement park. All they needed was to stay right in the room, throw a blanket over themselves, and start play acting, laughing their heads off. Even though doing all this in front of others felt a little embarrassing. Holding both children in his arms, he genuinely felt happier than he had in a long time. Worn out from playing, the children were snoring the moment their heads hit the pillow. The Grand Duke had to go back and finish up his paperwork before setting off on campaign. All this time, he'd been convinced the children didn't like spending time with him. Hazel gently explained that the children understood perfectly well how busy he was, but deep down, they truly loved every moment they got to spend with him. They noticed that whenever they played together, he kept glancing at the door and checking the clock. Didn't he realize the children were always secretly watching his expression? It was only then that the Grand Duke suddenly remembered. Every so often, the children would hesitantly ask, "Big brother, are you really busy? Wait until we're asleep before you go back to work, okay?" It was only now that he finally realized he hadn't been such a good big brother after all. So, once you make it home safe, no matter how buried you are in work, please set aside a little time to play with the children. In those moments, please set your work aside and just be their big brother. With that, Hazel placed into his hands a necklace she herself had braided. May the gods grant their blessing and may you return home safely. She'd thought she'd fully become part of the Duke's household, but Hazel suddenly realized it had all just been her own wishful thinking. Because after giving him the gift, she'd walked back to her room in high spirits. On the way, she caught a faint, delicious aroma drifting out from the kitchen. She suddenly remembered something the head chef once said, using the exact same ingredients, and yet somehow producing wildly different results in flavor. She wondered to herself, could this be some kind of special power unique to witches? But thinking back on the time she'd spent bonding with everyone, sharing the food she made really had brought her a lot of joy. If only I could just keep working here forever. Everyone here is so easy to get along with, too. Meanwhile, over in the kitchen, everyone had gathered around to scrutinize Hazel's dish, worried it might contain something harmful. But the knight couldn't detect the faintest trace of magic in it. If anything, the dish gave off a warm, nostalgic feeling. In short, he judged it to be perfectly safe. Still, the other servants in the kitchen remained on edge. What if eating it cursed them with magic and turned them into frogs? The knight thought to himself, as if that could really happen, and casually pushed open the kitchen door to step out. To his surprise, Hazel was standing right outside the door. Tears were even streaming down her face. Mortified at being caught, Hazel reflexively blurted out apologies and spun around to flee. The servants immediately started whispering anxiously among themselves. Luckily, the head chef quickly shouted for everyone to stop. As for Hazel, she ran straight back to her room, feeling utterly wretched. It turned out everyone had only been friendly toward her because they trusted the Grand Duke. And in truth, even he didn't fully trust her either. She thought bitterly to herself, why did my fate have to be so unlucky as to land me in the role of a villainess? Suddenly, there came a knock at the door. She opened it, and standing there was the head chef, who without any hesitation bowed deeply and offered a sincere apology. I honestly couldn't stand admitting I was less skilled than Miss Hazel. so I deliberately went looking for faults and gave you a hard time. You even complimented my cooking before, and yet I went and pulled such a low, petty stunt." With that, he carefully brought out a gift for Hazel. And to her surprise, it turned out to be a rare, precious ingredient. Kiam charo. This is an extremely rare cooking ingredient I spent years hunting down in my younger days. 100-year treasure, hard to come by at all. Hazel was stunned, unable to believe she'd received such a priceless gift. So she cheerfully invited the head chef to cook together with her in the kitchen the next day. Hazel's little heart, which had ached just moments ago, now suddenly warmed with an unfamiliar kind of comfort. Perhaps taking things one slow step at a time like this, there would come a day when she'd earn everyone's genuine care and affection. The next morning, the time had come for the Grand Duke to set off on his campaign. The two children had gotten up early to see their brother off. The Grand Duke felt both surprised and light with happiness. His two siblings looked nothing like their usual selves today. Little Luna kept chattering, insisting he bring back a gift when he returned, while little Luca just hoped he'd come back soon so they could play together again. The Grand Duke smiled with contentment, and the moment he looked up, he caught Hazel's eyes, full of quiet anticipation. He took Luna's small hand and told her, "While I'm away, you're the head of this household, understood?" It turned out that, about an hour earlier, Hazel had quietly asked the Grand Duke to grant Luna the title and authority of acting head of the household. Even amid the ruthless struggles for power, women were forbidden from inheriting titles. But little Luna absolutely loved acting mature like a grown-up. While His Highness was away, she'd surely become even more well-behaved and dignified. Sure enough, once her brother handed her that responsibility, Luna practically glowed with pride. She thumped her chest and declared boldly that no matter what scheming or plotting went on out there, she'd play the part of head of household properly and defend this estate with everything she had. Hearing such a grand declaration from Luna's tiny mouth, the Grand Duke was momentarily speechless, not knowing what to say. He tenderly kissed each child's forehead, then turned to prepare for his departure. Deep down, he vowed that this time, once he returned in triumph, he'd make sure to spend more time making it up to them. Just as Hazel had advised, the children needed to genuinely feel loved. As for Luna, once she had the power of head of household firmly in her grasp, she spun around dramatically and lifted her chin haughtily. "Humph, humph. I am now the head of this household, you know. Absolutely no more running around carelessly or acting rashly. Still, act mature as she might, the little lady certainly hadn't forgotten to demand her chocolate." Seeing this, Hazel quickly quoted a rule from the previous head of household. The head of the household must never use their power to indulge personal cravings. To everyone's surprise, sly little Luna had already planned ahead. Well then, in honor of my official appointment as head of household, I hereby decree that everyone in this estate shall be rewarded with a bar of chocolate. This way, it's not just the staff who benefit. I get to eat chocolate too, and so does little Luca, fair and square. What's more, under Luna's newly authoritative rule, poor Luca became her hapless victim, scrutinized down to the smallest detail at every meal, never able to lift or set down his fork in peace. Still, thanks to this new house rule, everyone got the chance to gather together happily for meals at the cottage. Even so, this liveliness was only ever going to last until the Grand Duke came home. The night Daniel, too, gradually settled in with everyone. But lately, little Luna had picked up a bad habit. She absolutely loved teasing and mocking other people. And the one who suffered the most from it was none other than the poor knight himself. Seeing this, Hazel tried to talk Luna into toning down her sharp tongue. But how could Luna ever give that up? Just looking at that attitude, no one could deny she was truly the Grand Duke's own sister. The two siblings shared the exact same trait, both a bit rude, and both loving nothing more than teasing others. Just then, little Luca came running over excitedly. "Sister Hazel, are we having fried rice today?" The story was, one time when Hazel was frying up leftover rice for a late-night snack, the two little ones had happened to catch her in the act. They tried it once and got hooked instantly, and ever since then, they'd been pestering her endlessly to make it again and again. In no time at all, a pan of fragrant fried rice was ready. Normally, a humble dish like this would have raised everyone's suspicions right away. But the children never overthought things like that. Besides, being able to gather warmly together over a meal at the cottage meant something to everyone, so Hazel asked the knight if they might switch to a slightly smaller table. To her surprise, the knight actually agreed to Hazel's request. "I suppose once His Highness the Grand Duke returns, I'll have to leave, won't I?" At that very moment, over in the eastern part of the empire, the Grand Duke had his troops setting up camp to rest. On this campaign, it was fortunate he'd brought along the necklace Hazel had given him. He couldn't help wondering whether the children back home were eating well and behaving themselves. Mealtime rolled around before long, but looking at the plain, simple food laid out before him, the Grand Duke couldn't bring himself to touch his chopsticks. It was then he thought of Hazel's cooking skills, hoping only to finish his duties quickly so he could get home to eat her food again. He'd completely forgotten he was supposed to fire Hazel the moment he got back. Suddenly, a woman came sobbing and stumbling toward him, wailing for him to please save her child. My boy was taken by the man-eating bees in the forest. The Grand Duke thought grimly, this isn't good. Man-eating bees, true to their name, were monstrous creatures that preyed specifically on humans. They must have taken the child to feed their larvae. If he hadn't been eaten yet, there was still a sliver of hope. The scouts under his command had already located the swarm's nest. The Grand Duke immediately ordered the vanguard to assemble and move out. In the end, they found the vicious swarm on a mountainside. A hail of sharp arrows sliced through the air. The man-eating bees were nearly wiped out entirely. The missing child was found safe and sound. The Grand Duke happily scooped the child up into his arms. But right at that moment, the queen bee suddenly came charging straight at them. Shielding the child, the Grand Duke took the full force of the queen bee's poisonous sting. In that split-second life-or-death moment, he'd accidentally revealed a top-secret power that no one was ever meant to see. The army medics rushed over in a panic to administer first aid. Fortunately, thanks to the protective necklace, the poisoned stinger failed to pierce through his chest. Staring at the shattered pendant in his hand, an ominous feeling suddenly rose up in the Grand Duke's chest. He needed to head home immediately. Meanwhile, the two children remained blissfully innocent and carefree. Still completely unaware of the storm brewing, little Luca asked hopefully how many more days until his brother came home. Hazel had heard rumors that the Emperor had ordered the complete extermination of every monster in the forest before the troops could be withdrawn. By her estimate, that alone would take at least 15 days. And yet 10 days had already passed with no word at all. She had no choice but to coax the children, promising that once the cauliflower in the garden had fully grown, their brother would be back. Let's take good care of the cauliflower together and make it grow fast, and wait for Big Brother to come home, okay? Little Luca was thrilled too, eagerly looking forward to the day he could eat cauliflower together with his brother. The following evening, after a full day of exhausting, non-stop work, Hazel was completely worn out. Yet these two little bundles of energy still had plenty left in the tank and absolutely refused to go to sleep. Somehow, after a morning of farm work, horseback riding lessons, and a round of ball games, the two of them still had energy to spare for mischief. Utterly defeated, Hazel had no choice but to use magic to round up the two little troublemakers darting around chaotically. She carried them both back to their room, planning to tell them a bedtime story to lull them to sleep. But little Luna insisted on volunteering to read Thumbelina herself. Lately, her vocabulary had grown considerably, and as a result, she'd become quite the fairy tale addict. Lulled by Luna's steady, even reading voice, little Luca quickly drifted off into a peaceful sleep. Hazel planned to wait until both of them were sound asleep before carrying each one back to their own room. Just then, Luna mumbled sleepily that she too wanted to be Thumbelina, so she could sleep in a bed made from a walnut shell. A flash of blinding lightning tore across the sky, making all three of them jump. Outside the window, heavy rain suddenly began pouring down in sheets. All the drowsiness the two children had felt vanished in an instant. Little Luca whimpered, insisting she absolutely had to sleep in Hazel's room tonight. Hazel found herself in quite the bind. Before leaving, the Grand Duke had strictly forbidden the children from sharing a room with her. But with a storm raging like this outside, leaving them alone and scared felt far too cruel. She turned around, only to find that little Luna had vanished into thin air. It turned out she'd already scrambled under the bed at some point. And yet that stubborn little mouth of hers kept insisting, as the heir of the Grand Duke's line, "How could I possibly be scared of a little thunder?" No sooner had she finished speaking than a booming clap of thunder instantly shattered her tough act. With no other option left, Hazel gave in and let both children sleep beside her. Before long, the two little ones curled up together and drifted off to sleep. This warm, cozy moment felt just like that very first day she'd stepped into the Grand Duke's estate. Clang, clang, clang! The sharp ring of clashing blades suddenly tore through the silence of the night. Hazel crept outside quietly to see what was going on. Once she came to her senses, she realized a fierce brawl was breaking out just outside. At first, she assumed it was just some drunken guards squabbling with each other. But looking closer, she realized the man fighting so recklessly out there was none other than the Knight Daniel. And the enemy he was fighting wore clothing that clearly wasn't a servant's uniform from the Duke's estate at all. The stranger, having just stepped out of Luna's room, shot a cold, sharp glare in Hazel's direction. He snarled, "So you're the nanny, huh? Where are the brats?" Sensing extreme danger, Hazel panicked and bolted back to the room as fast as her legs could carry her. From a distance, the Knight Daniel roared at the top of his lungs, "Don't you dare hand those children over to him." Without any idea what this whole mess was about, the most important thing right now was getting the children to safety immediately. Hazel rushed to the bed to wake the two little ones, who both sat up groggily, still half asleep. For Hazel, taking both children with her at once was genuinely going to be difficult. So she pulled out a vial of potion. "Do you two want to try Thumbelina Princess's special strawberry juice?" The moment they heard there was a drink involved, the two children eagerly wanted to try it right away. But after drinking it, Luca realized it didn't taste anything like strawberries at all. Before either of them could react, they'd both already been shrunk down to a tiny size. Hazel gently placed the two of them into the palm of her hand. Just then, the door burst open with a crash. "Where are the brats? They're not in the room. If you don't want to lose your life at such a young age, you'd better start talking now." Hazel quickly hid the children behind her back. Seeing her silence only made the vile man even angrier. She figured the children must be terrified. She knew she had to resolve the situation right away. So she carefully tucked the two little ones into her pocket. "How dare you wake my children? I've had enough of this." To protect the children she loved, Hazel finally made the decision to use dark magic. After one devastating burst of magic, the assassin who'd been so arrogant and violent moments ago was instantly turned into a toad, which Hazel coldly kicked straight out the window. Hearing the commotion, the assassins outside came rushing in as well. This must be the room where the children are hidden, as she probably had to work hard to get them to sleep. Kiem Trarai. But in the end, this incident only cemented her reputation as the wicked witch of everyone's rumors. Right as she was fleeing, an assassin nearly caught her off guard with a sneak attack. Luckily, the puppy leapt up and clamped down on the man's sleeve, then glanced back at Hazel as if telling her to take the children and go, that it would handle things here. A little while later, Hazel finally made it back to her familiar cookie cottage. Sure enough, both children were on the verge of tears with fright. She hurried to soothe them. "It's okay now, it's okay. Wait here quietly for a moment, okay? I'll go find you two a bed." Now shrunk down in size, the children were absolutely delighted at the sight of the cookies. Luca even begged to climb right into the sugar jar. Hazel then fashioned two little walnut shell beds for the children. Luna cried out happily, "This is just like Thumbelina. If only we had a little blanket made of flower petals too, that would be perfect." Naturally, Hazel granted that tiny request right away. "Sleep well, you two, and have sweet dreams." Breathing in the sweet floral scent, Luca's eyes were already growing heavy. But Luna kept her eyes wide open, tossing and turning restlessly. What if those bad people come back? That remark instantly caught Hazel's attention. Even though Luca no longer remembered, the girl herself could never forget a memory from her own childhood, a time when she'd nearly been smothered with a pillow by her old wet nurse. Hearing Luna recount this old memory, Hazel finally understood why the children hated caretakers so much. Aching for her, she said, "It's okay, Luna, I'm here now. Leave the grown-up matters to the grown-ups. Just relax and get a nice, sound sleep, okay?" Meanwhile, elsewhere, the knight had already tied up every last one of the intruders. Still, the pile of sausages scattered all over the floor left him thoroughly confused. Where did the witch and the children go? Someone quickly pointed toward a wardrobe, saying they were hiding inside it. The knight never imagined that at such a critical moment a wardrobe would come in so handy. He stepped through the wardrobe and found himself inside the cookie cottage. Seeing the children fast asleep, he said aloud, "I will absolutely report every detail of Miss Hazel's efforts to the Grand Duke." The little princess and prince had nearly been kidnapped by villains, but in the end were saved by the witch. Truly a fairy tale with a happy ending. But the moment the Grand Duke returned and saw the wreckage everywhere, along with the shattered portrait frame of Luna and Luca lying on the floor, he panicked instantly, fearing something terrible had happened to his siblings. And so, Hazel was finally able to stay on and care for the children without any more obstacles. With the storm behind them, Hazel returned to the Duke's estate. In his panic, the Grand Duke reflexively opened his mouth to demand loudly where the children were. To his surprise, the moment he looked down, he saw his two siblings standing right there, safe and sound. Afterward, thanks to the knight's explanation, the Grand Duke learned that the assassins had dug an underground tunnel to sneak in. What's more, their strength had been absolutely terrifying. Built like the barbarians of the north, their kind of menace was something the Grand Duke had encountered countless times on the battlefield. For the estate's guards to have held them off at all was truly no small feat. You truly did something remarkable tonight. The knight, too, openly admitted that everything turning out fine was entirely thanks to Hazel. If not for her, the children would likely have been kidnapped long ago. She'd used magic to transform every last blade the kidnappers carried into sausages and broccoli. Meanwhile, in another corner, Hazel had already finished tidying everything up. She'd cleaned up the entire mess with magic, and now she was hesitating, unsure how to find the words to say goodbye to the children. Just then, the Grand Duke suddenly appeared at the door. I want to apologize for my rudeness earlier. It was wrong of me to say such harsh things to the very person who saved my siblings' lives. Suddenly, he noticed the shattered window. Terrified that her secret about turning people into frogs might be exposed, Hazel rambled anxiously, "The window, I'll pay for it, I promise." Thinking about having to part with the children soon, and on top of that, having accidentally turned an intruder into a frog. Turning it all over in her mind again and again, the tears just kept falling. The Grand Duke suddenly looked flustered, fumbling awkwardly, and then heard Hazel sob out. "Honestly, I always suspected you might be a bit paranoid. The estate's rules are so strict, even the food has to be tested for poison every time. But after hearing Luna tell that story yesterday, I finally understood. Have you truly never heard the rumors about how my parents died from a sudden illness? At the time, they'd been perfectly healthy, with no reason at all to suddenly die, and not a trace of poison was ever found. By the time anyone found them, they were already gone. That's why I became so extreme, so fiercely protective of my siblings. I was only 17 back then. Even if I were assassinated one day, I had to hold on until Luca was old enough to become head of the family." To his surprise, Hazel burst into tears. "You're still just a child yourself. That's so incredibly sad." The Grand Duke was taken aback, wondering, am I really still considered a child? But then again, to a witch who could live for centuries, he supposed he really was still practically a child. Even so, Hazel asked through her tears, would I still be allowed to visit the children sometime after this? Met with the Grand Duke's shake of the head, she turned away sorrowfully to leave. To her surprise, he called out and pulled her back. "What I mean is, let's sign a new contract. In order to properly care for these adorable children, would this witch, as lovely as she is well off, agree to formally become the estate's nanny?" Hazel's eyes went wide as she stared at the contract before her. Wasn't this exactly what she'd wanted most? Without a word, Hazel took up the pen, her hand trembling. She wrote out neatly that she would raise and care for the two children with all her heart. Taking the paper back, the Grand Duke couldn't help but remark, "Who on earth draws a little heart on a contract?" Hazel babbled an explanation that it was simply because she was overjoyed, which only left him even more baffled than before. Why did Hazel adore his siblings so much anyway? His knight, too, shared that exact same bewilderment. He tore at his hair, unable to understand why the Grand Duke had drawn up a nanny contract in the first place, let alone why he now insisted on personally overseeing her every move himself. Not only that, he'd taken Hazel completely at her word that letting the children play in the dirt would actually boost their immune systems. This left the knight unable to help but wonder whether his master had perhaps fallen head over heels in love. He never imagined losing the chance to work alongside the nanny would leave him feeling this disappointed. "What are you still standing there for? Get out already." The knight muttered a curse under his breath and left. It was then that the Grand Duke suddenly recalled the prisoners they'd just captured. The strange foreign energy radiating off them was identical to that of the Crown Prince's court mage. But for now, all he could do was hold his position and wait. At the moment, the number of families allied with the Duke's estate was painfully small. If he stirred up public sentiment recklessly, he risked being branded a traitor. At that very moment, deep within the royal palace, the Crown Prince was enduring the Emperor's furious wrath. In the Emperor's eyes, this latest assassination attempt had been nothing but a reckless, foolish act. The princess couldn't resist adding a mocking remark. This boy probably doesn't even want to be this stupid himself. That comment only enraged the emperor further, convinced that at this rate, the crown prince would destroy everything he'd worked his whole life to build. If you trampled over your own sister to claim the crown prince's seat, then at least have the decency to act like you deserve it. Do you have any idea how the whole realm keeps comparing you to the Grand Duke? To keep the Grand Duke's power in check, the princess had agreed to give up her own claim to the throne while secretly plotting a scheme of her own. But right at that critical moment, the third child, Luca, was born. To use him as a tool to eliminate a rival, they kept pushing the Grand Duke into the most dangerous battles. But his luck held every single time, and he always returned home safe and sound. Afterward, the emperor sent both the empress and the princess away, wanting to discipline this useless crown prince himself alone. The moment she stepped outside, the princess couldn't hide her satisfaction, openly mocking the crown prince's stupidity. Already incompetent, and with an empty head to match, truly beyond saving. That remark instantly enraged the empress. A sharp-tongued stepdaughter indeed. But since she still needed her to help seize the throne, the empress had no choice but to grit her teeth and endure it, silently vowing that sooner or later she'd make the girl pay dearly. Meanwhile, left alone inside, the crown prince kept tearing at his hair, utterly confused. The location of the hidden holy relic held real power, but in truth, that witch had never once been on their side. All I care about is the money. Who could have guessed that little Luca was such a glutton he'd even beg to taste fertilizer meant for the plants? While the Grand Duke was still lost in thought about the prisoners, Hazel was busy pushing a cart of fertilizer into the greenhouse. Little did she know the Grand Duke was there too. The moment little Luna spotted Hazel, she came running over joyfully. Look at this. The seedlings have already grown so much in no time at all. Hearing that, Hazel suddenly remembered. After dealing with the intruders earlier, she'd used magic to burn through the entire batch of cauliflower. These were just seedlings she'd hastily replanted afterward. Seeing the Grand Duke about to speak up, she worried he wouldn't be able to come up with a plausible excuse to cover for her. So Hazel instinctively lunged forward to clamp a hand over his mouth. But the Grand Duke skillfully dodged her, then turned to tell the children it looked like the plants had been fertilized. Confused, Luca turned and asked, "Miss, what's fertilizer?" "It's delicious food for cauliflower." Hazel breathed a sigh of relief that the Grand Duke hadn't given away her secret. Instead, he played along with what she'd brought, telling the children that once fertilizer went into the soil, the plants could eat it right away. And then they'd grow up big and strong. Luca's eyes lit up at that. So can I eat it too?" That innocent question left both adults thoroughly alarmed, and they scrambled to stop him. "Oh no, don't eat that." A little while later, back at the cottage, Luca ate until his belly was completely full. Hazel let out a relieved sigh too, grateful the boy hadn't secretly eaten any fertilizer. Dinner that night was fried pork ribs served with a side of lettuce. The four of them gathered warmly around the small dining table. And yet the Grand Duke started being picky again. "Why is there rabbit food sitting on this table?" "Well, it tastes far better than it looks, you know. I personally seasoned it with sesame dressing myself. Just give it a try, I promise you'll change your mind." The children were thrilled to hear that and wanted to try it immediately. But the Grand Duke still curled his lip in disdain. Raw cabbage? Even a starving farmer wouldn't touch this. Just then, Luna's sharp little voice piped up, "Big brother, could you please stop complaining at the dinner table? You're a grown-up, and yet you won't eat whatever's put in front of you. Doesn't that make you the badly behaved one?" Luca chimed in with a pout too. "I eat whatever I'm given. You shouldn't be like that, big brother." The Grand Duke was left utterly speechless, stunned that his own siblings would dare say such things to him. So sighing in resignation, he picked up his spoon and ate quietly. A little while later, the plate was completely clean, not a single scrap of vegetable left. Seems like this rabbit food actually suits your taste after all. The Grand Duke never imagined that after all those years of forcing his siblings to eat carrots, the day would come when the two of them would lecture him right back. In truth, he'd changed a great deal recently. Not only did he allow the wardrobe passage between the mansion and the candy cottage to stay open, he'd also started coming to the little cottage regularly for meals. Even though his personality was still somewhat rigid at times, after meals, the children would run outside together to play, having the time of their lives. Watching that scene, Hazel couldn't help feeling a wave of emotion, as if the four of them had truly become a real family. The dining hall at the Grand Duke's estate was far too large for just the three of them. For the children, mealtimes there had become nothing more than a forced obligation, and that was entirely his fault. Hearing this, the Grand Duke fell silent for a moment, and in the end agreed to switch to a smaller dining room. To show her gratitude, Hazel gave him a large supply of chocolate. She'd heard the royal palace was about to hold a victory banquet. He'd only just managed to make it home, and she truly couldn't bear the thought of him leaving again so soon. Hazel was about to bring up the idea of letting the children come along, but before she could say a word, the Grand Duke cut her off. Instead of worrying about that. "You always treat me like a child. I am the Grand Duke. Please stop seeing me as some fragile little boy." Realizing he'd seen right through her guilty expression, Hazel slunk away, deflated. "There's one more thing. I need to add a new rule." Hazel took the list of house rules and read it over. The newly added rule turned out to be, from now on, no physical contact of any kind with one's employer is permitted. That day, the first time the two children ever went out to play, they'd run straight into danger. After the Grand Duke rolled out a string of new rules, Hazel struck right back. For him to become a proper role model of a big brother, she demanded that from now on, he drop that mocking tone of his for good. "I've already learned to copy you perfectly, and it's seriously undermining my proper approach to raising them, you know." To her surprise, the Grand Duke calmly replied that Luna's personality was the spitting image of their mother's. How frightening! Could a mother really become such an obstacle on a child's path to growing up? Seeing the Grand Duke slip back into his mocking tone, Hazel hurriedly cast a spell to slap him right in the face with it. That day, the whole group set off for Dye Island to celebrate the new year. The entire upper class would gather there for a grand, lavish New Year's ball. Little Luca was so excited he tossed and turned all night, unable to sleep a wink. And because of their agreement not to touch each other, the atmosphere inside the carriage felt unusually tense and stifling. In the middle of it all, Hazel suggested playing a game of collaborative storytelling, where each person added just one sentence to a fairy tale. But the game fell apart in spectacular fashion almost immediately. The moment Hazel opened with the first line, the Duke mercilessly mocked it. She had no choice but to retell the opening of the story, but through the children's patchwork retelling, it soon morphed into a tale about meeting a witch in the forest and getting to eat amazing carrot cake. And in the end, Luca, Luna, their big brother, and Hazel all lived happily ever after together. That ending left both adults blushing furiously with embarrassment. To break the awkward tension, they switched to playing a word chain game instead. Out of nowhere, the carriage was suddenly ambushed by a pack of snow creatures as it rolled along. To protect the children, the Duke decided to charge out and fight them off alone. He even used his holy power to form a protective barrier around the carriage. But since holy power and magic were fundamentally incompatible with each other, Hazel found herself completely unable to help. The children, meanwhile, stayed perfectly calm, telling Hazel not to worry and to just get back to their word game. Outside, the Duke fought with absolute decisiveness, cutting down two of the snow creatures with a single swing of his sword. The sight made Hazel's heart start pounding uncontrollably. She stopped paying any attention to what the children were saying and just stared out the window, murmuring to herself, "He's so ridiculously cool." Little Luca asked curiously, "Is ridiculously cool a vocabulary word?" Right as Hazel remained hopelessly dazed by the Duke's looks, the last of the snow creatures had already been wiped out. The two children eagerly begged to rush outside to find their brother. But Hazel, still trapped by the holy barrier, couldn't step out of the carriage. She recalled feeling that same power once before, back when she'd first arrived at the cottage. She wondered who in the Duke's household could possibly possess that kind of power. Trapped inside a carriage wrapped in holy power like this, even magic was useless. Just then, a loud thumping sound suddenly came from behind the carriage. A snow creature had somehow already climbed onto the carriage without anyone noticing. The Duke and the children spotted the danger too, but before help could arrive, the horses had already spooked, whinnying wildly and bolting off at full speed. Seeing the children about to panic and rush forward, Hazel moved to keep the snow creature from harming them. The instant the carriage's protective barrier shattered, Hazel yanked the reins and sent the carriage careening down the mountainside. As she drove, she shouted for the children not to worry. In the end, the carriage flipped over and slammed straight into a tree trunk. Just as she was silently thanking the heavens for surviving, the very next moment, her hand was suddenly gripped tightly by the Duke. "You look all right. Can you stand up on your own now?" Hazel looked down to find her ankle badly swollen from a sprain, only to hear the Duke tease her unexpectedly. Don't tell me you don't know a healing spell, and you can't even ride a broomstick either. Aren't witches supposed to know these basic skills? Hearing Hazel wave her hands and admit she was clueless about both, the Duke fell into deep thought. Well then, I suppose I'll just have to carry you. With that, he swept Hazel up into his arms and walked on through the pure white snow. This was the first time Hazel had ever been carried like this. Watching the Duke pant for breath, it was clear he must have run here as fast as he possibly could. His neck bore visible red frostbite marks, and his hair was soaked through and matted down. Without thinking, she reached out and pulled his shirt collar closed, muttering, "It's freezing out here, you need to bundle up properly." But the sweet, tender mood didn't even last a second before the two of them were back to bickering over old grievances. Meanwhile, back at the carriage, the children were beside themselves with worry over Hazel's safety. Little Luna was even crying softly, terrified something might happen to her brother while he was out rescuing someone. To her surprise, the moment she turned around, she caught a rather touching scene. Luna thought gleefully to herself, "Looks like I'm about to successfully match up my beloved big sister with my brother." After sneaking a quiet laugh, she suddenly noticed with alarm that Hazel's leg was injured. She and her brother hurriedly blew gently on the wound to soothe it, and to everyone's surprise, that adorable gesture left the Duke burning with jealousy. Hazel understood all too well. The Duke was the type who'd never breathe a word to the children no matter how badly he was hurt. He always silently gritted his teeth and endured the pain alone. That figure, seen from behind, looked so grand and imposing at first glance, and yet it was heartbreakingly lonely too. Afterward, with a bit of potion applied, Hazel's leg healed completely. This is all my fault, and on top of that, the carriage has been smashed to pieces too. Now the whole group has no choice but to walk to the nearest town to find lodging. The moment they stepped into the inn, the knights traveling with them looked visibly relieved and delighted. The innkeeper's cooking turned out to be absolutely top-notch. The food had all been laid out piping hot, but there was still no sign of the Duke anywhere. Unable to hold back, Luca finally asked about it. Seeing that little Luca had grown considerate enough to want to share good food with others truly moved Hazel, especially given how hungry he must have been himself. When Hazel told the children to go ahead and eat first, the two siblings' faces fell with disappointment. They insisted firmly that food was only good when eaten piping hot. It wasn't until Hazel promised to warm it back up later that the two sweethearts finally agreed, picking up their spoons and happily digging in. No matter how unfamiliar a dish might seem, the children now happily devoured anything the estate's head chef made. The Grand Duke soon arrived at the inn as well, and the moment he got there, he asked whether the food had suited the two children's tastes. Perhaps because it was snowing so heavily outside, Hazel noticed a thick layer of snow had settled on the Duke's coat. Before she could mention it, a knight stepped forward to offer him a drink. To set a good example for the children, Hazel gently declined. Watching the Grand Duke raise his glass, she thought, with looks like that, he could easily land a job as a beer commercial model. But it was the snow clinging to his shoulders that occupied her thoughts far more. She desperately wanted to brush it off for him, but given the no-contact clause in their contract, she had no choice but to lean in close and blow it off instead, and the sudden gesture made the Grand Duke jump in surprise. In the end, he simply took off his outer coat and handed it to Hazel. "In a situation like this, should I be thanking you? Then again, I did just let you satisfy your urge to brush the snow off me, so really, you should be thanking me." At that moment, little Luna, standing nearby, broke into a mischievous grin. She imagined what the knight Daniel's reaction would be if he saw this scene. To her surprise, she happened to learn that Daniel was actually a holy knight. No wonder she'd sensed holy power coming from him earlier. After eating, Hazel took the children to check into their room. They were told they'd be staying in the largest room at the inn. To her surprise, the moment she opened the door, she came face to face with the Grand Duke. The innkeeper, walking behind them, looked puzzled. Hazel explained that there'd been a double booking mix-up. Something like this has never happened before, honestly. The innkeeper quickly covered her mouth in embarrassment. "Surely you two don't want the children sleeping in a separate room, do you?" The witch everyone believed ate human flesh had by now completely won over everyone's affection. Even the innkeeper had mistaken her for the children's mother. This left the Grand Duke utterly baffled. Hazel and the children didn't resemble each other in the slightest. The innkeeper explained bashfully. "A handsome man, a beautiful woman, and such adorable children besides. Anyone would mistake you all for a real family." Hearing the compliment, Hazel blushed too. I suppose I really am rather pretty, aren't I? In truth, the outfit she was wearing was never meant to be a nanny's uniform. It was an expensive gown, the kind only a wealthy young lady would ever wear. Because of this, rumors had once spread through the estate that the Grand Duke harbored improper intentions toward his nanny. Coincidentally, at that very moment, a group of knights happened to be passing by the door. To their dismay, they learned they'd have to share a room with the Grand Duke. Even though every fiber of their being wanted to refuse, in the end they had no choice but to reluctantly accept. Hazel took the children into their room as well. Before long, little Luca had already drifted off to sleep. Soothed by Hazel's gentle patting, Luna too fell peacefully asleep. Hazel wanted to use the spare time to squeeze in a bit of magic study, but she'd barely read for a little while before she was overcome with drowsiness. Suddenly, a loud noise rang out from beyond the window. The moment she stepped outside, she saw angels blowing their horns in a resounding fanfare. It seemed His Holiness the Pope had made it there safely. It was then that Hazel noticed the Grand Duke was also standing out on the balcony. So these angels were summoned here by the Pope? Did you know he actually has the power to conjure illusions? Hearing that, Hazel turned away, a little embarrassed. With that, the Grand Duke turned back inside and returned with a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. It's not work hours right now, so I don't suppose you have any excuse to refuse, do you? Hazel accepted the glass of wine, surprised at just how delicious it turned out to be. She also learned that the locals traditionally drank this particular wine to celebrate the new year. Watching Hazel's bright, cheerful smile, the Grand Duke found himself lost in thought without realizing it. She seems to know so much about so many things, and yet at other times she acts as innocent as if she knows nothing at all. She really is a strange, mysterious woman. Not long after, the Empire officially held its New Year's ceremony. The children followed their brother to be presented before the Pope. However, they were instructed to have the children and their nanny wait in the drawing room first. Just then, someone called out to the Grand Duke. It's been a whole year since that last festival, hasn't it, since we last saw each other? This year, His Holiness wanted to see you first thing, too. Seems he still favors you as much as ever. The Grand Duke knew perfectly well that was exactly how it looked to outsiders. But in reality, the Pope felt nothing but disdain for him. Sure enough, after he offered a polite greeting, the Pope only mumbled a half-hearted reply before striding straight past him toward the knight Daniel. It's been too long, Daniel. Watching the tense, awkward air between the two of them, the Grand Duke wanted nothing more than to slip away immediately. A little later, the group had a private meeting. It was then that the Pope's demeanor suddenly shifted, worlds apart from just moments before. She bluntly confronted the knight Daniel, abandoning me to follow the Grand Duke instead. Are you happy now? The remark made the Grand Duke freeze mid-sip of his tea. He quickly tried to smooth things over. Don't worry, I pay him quite generously. Could he really not recognize that as the lament of a woman who'd lost the one love of her life? Afterward, the group shifted the conversation to Hazel. The Pope noted that she was nothing like the rumors suggested, and in fact got along wonderfully with the children. No matter how closely she looked, nothing seemed suspicious about her. If anything, the only odd thing was how extravagant her outfit was. Hardly what you'd expect from a nanny. The Grand Duke quickly changed the subject, mentioning that he planned to bring his 2 siblings along to the palace dinner that evening. The Pope's expression immediately darkened. Are you sure it's really wise to bring children to a dinner like that? Little did anyone know, the moment the 2 little ones set foot in the palace for the very first time, they'd be facing an enormous challenge. In the face of the Pope's doubts about the children, the Grand Duke simply responded with a calm, easy smile. Tonight you can judge for yourself with your own eyes. Meanwhile, back at the cottage, Hazel was rushing through the final preparations with the 2 children. If you get too nervous, just take a deep breath, okay? Remember, once food goes into your mouth, no matter how awful it tastes, you must never spit it back out. If something tastes good, eat it properly right away. And if you're ever confused about what to do, just watch your brother and copy him. The 2 little ones answered together, crisp and clear, in perfect unison. And so, a grueling month of etiquette training finally came to an end. Everyone set off at once, heading straight for the royal palace. Hazel, too, was granted special permission to come along, standing quietly at the very back of the line in her role as nanny. A little while later, the Emperor himself entered the dining hall. With one glance, he zeroed in on the 2 children, looking utterly delighted. Aha! My precious grandchildren have really come to the feast, have they? I went to great lengths to prepare only the finest delicacies, especially for you 2. I'm sure you'll clean your plates without leaving a single scrap, won't you? The two little ones obediently began eating the vegetables set before them. Big deal, this stuff's a piece of cake, they thought. And yet that alone was enough to leave everyone around them staring in astonishment. It seemed the children's reputation for being picky eaters had spread far and wide. Next, as long as a few more dishes like this came out, everything would go off without a hitch. No sooner had Hazel finished that thought in her head than, sure enough, the next dish turned out to be snails. The sheer difficulty of this course left all three of them gasping in horror. Knowing full well there were children present tonight, and yet still deliberately serving snails no matter what. Fortunately, the Grand Duke had carefully instructed her beforehand. If any dish proved too disgusting for the children to swallow, Hazel was to step in and save the day immediately. So she quietly whispered for the two little ones to do exactly as they'd practiced. The instant they lifted their forks to their mouths, she cast her swap spell. It was almost as if she'd had some kind of foresight, predicting these nightmare dishes and drilling them so thoroughly in advance. Before long, the next course arrived. Good heavens, this dish was somehow 10 times more revolting than the last. Even the Grand Duke grimaced as he chewed through it. Seeing this, Hazel seized the moment and used magic to slip his entire portion straight into her own mouth instead. It had been ages since she'd tasted something as rich and satisfying as pork intestines, not since she'd first been transported into this world. As she chewed away happily, a sharp, shrill female voice suddenly rang out. "Good heavens, Zirath, you dare spit your food out in the middle of a meal like this?" The Crown Prince's face went pale, flustered, and at a loss for what to do. Catching the tense, hostile air crackling between the two of them, Hazel finally realized this entire royal family was nothing but a nest of villains. Once the meal ended, the Crown Prince slipped away to vomit violently in a corner. Hazel never imagined she'd run into him again under such an awkward circumstance. If I'd known he was this good-looking, I'd have gone looking for him myself already. Who would have thought that the Crown Prince himself would have once gone out of his way to track her down? It must have had something to do with that reputation of hers as the wicked witch from before. Before she could even finish the thought, the next moment he snapped at her loudly, demanding why she hadn't come to help him that day. Just as the Crown Prince was about to shout even more, his attendant behind him quickly cut him off. Hazel could only stand there blinking as the two of them walked away, telling herself that no matter what, she needed to dig up more information about all this. Back at the party, with nothing more than a leftover cookie crumb, Hazel had somehow managed to turn Luna and Luca into the envy of every child in the room. While the two little ones were happily playing in the ballroom, they never expected someone would come looking for trouble. "Isn't your nanny that wicked witch, Hazel?" Hearing someone dare to badmouth Hazel, Luna bristled instantly and snapped back. "No, she's not. She's the kindest witch in the whole world. What backwater family do you even come from, huh? Are you tired of picking a fight with the Grand Duke's household, home to the Empire's greatest swordsman? If you're so bold, then own up to what you just barked out." Just as Hazel hesitated over whether to step in, little Luca came running into her arms, whimpering. The boy tearfully explained that the other kid had called Hazel an evil witch, which was why the two siblings had ended up in a heated argument. Getting the gist of it, Hazel quickly took stock of the situation. "Think about it, kiddo. If I really were a wicked witch, would I really be handing out my delicious cookies to a little noble like you?" Seeing Hazel about to offer a cookie to the glaring boy, Luna pouted openly. Giving cookies to a rude brat like him is a total waste. The boy, drooling helplessly, still refused to back down with his mouth, clinging stubbornly to the last shred of his pride, absolutely refusing to eat a cookie baked by a witch. To everyone's surprise, Hazel promptly put on a little show, making the cookies dance and act out a whole scene straight out of a TV drama. Needless to say, the little nobles gathered around were instantly glued to the spectacle, so mesmerized they forgot to even head home. Seeing this, little Luna puffed up with even more pride and delight. As for the rude little boy, he stood there dumbstruck, staring intently at the cookie in his hand. In the end, his pride crumbled completely, and unable to resist any longer, he took a bite. Well, delicious enough to make you swallow your tongue, isn't it? Even though the boy refused to admit it at all, Hazel's cookies really were incredibly delicious. Suddenly, everyone found themselves wishing they had a witch nanny just like her. But right at that moment, the voice of the royal consort rang out. Just how spoiled must these children be if they need a witch and her dark magic to raise them properly? Luna immediately spoke up in Hazel's defense, insisting she had never once used dark magic. The girl blamed herself, thinking it was because she wasn't lovable enough that so many nannies had run off in fear. Those cruel words cut Luna deeply. Hazel could hardly believe a royal consort would say something so venomous to a child. So, as the woman turned to walk away, Hazel secretly used magic to make her trip and stumble face first. Instantly, a piercing shriek echoed through the entire palace. If you're going to open your mouth and say such cruel things to a child, tusk, you'd better start building up some good karma for yourself. And Luna had witnessed the entire scene unfold. On the carriage ride home, Hazel and the Grand Duke took turns showering the children with praise. Even eating in such a crowded, formal setting, the two of them had stayed remarkably composed, without making a single mistake. So whatever reward you two want, just say the word. Luca immediately rattled off a whole list of 10 wishes without pausing for breath. But Luna, sitting beside him, stayed quiet the entire time. Hazel knew exactly why the girl looked so down. Ignoring the jolting of the carriage, she leaned over, wrapped Luna in a hug, and said soothingly, "You were incredibly well-behaved tonight." "But I'm not lovable," Luna said. Hearing that, Hazel immediately protested. "If you're not lovable, then who on earth is? But Luke is more lovable than me, isn't he?" She replied gently, "There's no such thing as a standard for being lovable. Everyone sees it differently." "Then what's the royal consort's standard, huh? Is it because I've been too unruly?" Instead of answering directly, Hazel asked back, "Do you think everyone loves your brother just because he's lovable?" To her surprise, Luna answered immediately, "He's not lovable at all, is he? Even without being lovable, he's still loved by everyone. So if I grow up to be just like him, would the royal consort like me then?" Seeing Luna's wounded, vulnerable expression, Hazel couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy, remembering her own childhood. So she looked the girl straight in the eye with unwavering conviction. "Listen to me. If someone tells you they don't love you, never let that make you feel like you're the one who's unworthy. Because that's their problem, not any fault of yours." These were the exact words her own grandmother had once told her. Right now, Hazel's only wish was to be able to protect these children. And yet, the cruel deeds the previous witch had once committed were something she simply couldn't ignore. So she cast a small spell to swap her senses. As luck would have it, at that very moment the Crown Prince happened to be talking about her. He had no idea just how much he'd let slip that day. He still firmly believed Hazel was on his side. It was only then that Hazel finally understood. The previous owner of this body had once been affiliated with the royal faction. Aren't witches supposed to be able to sense holy power? The only reason I lowered myself to talk to her was to find out exactly where that holy relic is hidden in the Grand Duke's household. Well, she must have felt incredibly honored just to meet me. Judging by that dazed look on her face, she was clearly swept off her feet by my handsome looks. Hazel was left speechless listening to this. She never imagined the Crown Prince was this deep in his own delusions of grandeur. If we're talking about good looks, surely that title belongs to someone on the Grand Duke's level. Just as she was thinking that, the Crown Prince suddenly flew into a rage, slamming his fist on the table. That devil of a Grand Duke hasn't caused any trouble lately, so his reputation's probably only grown even more, hasn't it? I originally planned to eliminate him the exact same way I got rid of his parents. But Father insisted I not act recklessly. Right after that, the Crown Prince suddenly noticed the cookie hidden in his pocket. Sensing the danger, Hazel immediately severed the magical connection. Thanks to that, she'd managed to catch a shocking secret straight from the Crown Prince's own mouth. While she was still lost in thought, the Grand Duke suddenly walked in, startling Hazel badly. "I came here simply to say thank you. You accomplished something no one else could have. A talented nanny like you deserves a reward. Is there anything you'd like?" Without a moment's hesitation, Hazel answered right away, "Yes, there is." But to everyone's surprise, all Hazel really wanted was simply for him to trust her. The Grand Duke could hardly believe his own ears and asked her to explain why. "Because I will always stand by the Grand Duke's side, unconditionally. Even if there are things that weren't actually done by me, who knows what misunderstandings might arise down the road. So please, I need you to trust me no matter what." Even though the Grand Duke had no idea what Hazel was getting at, he nodded and agreed to trust her anyway. Afterward, Hazel put on a serious expression and revealed the truth about the royal faction pulling the strings behind the scenes. To her surprise, the Grand Duke simply replied calmly that he'd already known about it for a long time. "I pretended not to know, purely to keep you safe, Hazel. And come to think of it, I specifically told you not to get involved in this matter at all, didn't I? Hazel had no choice but to tell the Grand Duke about her encounter with the Crown Prince earlier that day. That he'd claimed to be searching for the location of a holy relic hidden somewhere in his household? Was that the real reason behind their attack? Actually, a few years back, the royal family had once quietly inquired about whether my mother, given her status as a holy maiden, might use the holy relic as a betrothal token. No one besides the children must ever learn about what happened today. The only people who know about this are myself, Daniel, and the captain of the guard. But how exactly did you manage to slip past the sensing abilities of the mage standing beside the Crown Prince? Hazel explained that she'd used a sense-swapping spell and cast it onto the cookies. This only left the Grand Duke even more puzzled. Here was a witch who didn't even know a basic healing spell. And yet she could genuinely pull off such an advanced piece of magic? Suspicious as it was when he recalled Hazel's passionate, heartfelt vow from earlier. As for Luna's determined efforts to play matchmaker for her brother, ever since that night at the palace when the children had won over every noble in attendance, the demand for witches as caretakers had skyrocketed. As a result, Hazel received a formal invitation from the Mage Association. While she was still puzzling over why she'd been invited at all, the two little ones came running up to drag her off on a picnic. To her surprise this time, the Grand Duke came along too. Before long, the whole group had settled down together in the forest to enjoy sandwiches. Sure enough, food made with your own two hands really was the tastiest. This time, they'd wandered fairly deep into the forest without realizing it. After eating, the children eagerly begged to push further ahead and go exploring. By the time they came back, their hair was tangled with leaves, and they'd picked a whole armful of flowers, loudly demanding they be braided into a wreath. The moment Hazel finished braiding a flower ring for the children, she suddenly felt someone's gaze fixed intently on her back. She immediately racked her brain, trying to figure out what she might have done wrong. Aren't you busy? I mean, aren't you always buried in mountains of paperwork in your office? Seeing the Grand Duke stay silent, she assumed he'd come to keep an eye on her. Didn't you tell me I should spend more time with the children? But you keep tailing me around like some kind of bodyguard. The Grand Duke explained that he was simply protecting his siblings, because this forest is dangerous. But in Hazel's eyes, if he really wanted to protect them, he should be following the children, not sitting here right next to her like this. Hearing that, the Grand Duke gazed at Hazel intently. After a moment's hesitation, he asked, "Do you hate me that much?" Startled, Hazel waved her hands frantically. "No, that's not it at all." "So you like me then?" "Well, not quite that far either. What I mean is, Your Highness is a very good person." Hearing that, the Grand Duke turned away looking embarrassed. Just then, it suddenly began pouring rain, and the whole group rushed into a nearby church to take shelter. The rain was coming down so hard it clearly wasn't going to let up anytime soon. Seeing that Hazel was soaked through, the Grand Duke took off his outer coat and draped it over her shoulders. Out of nowhere, Luna cheered and demanded they play a game of pretend pope. What does a pope even do? He's the one who likes to bully his older cousin, and he also officiates weddings. Hearing that, Luna's face lit up instantly. "Allow me to introduce. The groom is Grand Duke Ryan, and the bride is Lady Hazel." Embarrassed, Hazel tried to talk Luna into switching it to a wedding between the kitten and the puppy instead, but the girl flatly refused. The two of them had no choice but to stand there awkwardly, and what came out of Luna's mouth next left them even more stunned. "Now that you two are officially married, share a kiss to seal your vow of eternal loyalty and love." Under Luna's relentless chanting of "kiss, kiss," both their faces turned as red as ripe tomatoes. Right in that awkward moment, Hazel suddenly shouted out, "Look, the rain stopped!" It turned out this was, unbelievably, the very first time Hazel had ever successfully cast a weather spell. As they stepped back outside, Luca asked curiously, "Sister Hazel, don't you want a little brother or sister of your own?" Luna chimed right in. "If Sister Hazel married our big brother, wouldn't that make us your siblings too? So, come on, you two should just get married. A Grand Duke and a witch could never actually marry, though. Noble marriages are really just political tools, you know. It's not like you can marry just because you like each other. It's all just contracts signed between noble families. So will you have to marry that way too someday?" "That's right. Because our family also needs the backing of other powerful families." Hazel quickly waved her hands as well, making it clear she had absolutely no thoughts of marriage on her mind. Luna stared at Hazel with suspicion for a long moment before speaking. "Fair enough. If I were you, Sister Hazel, I wouldn't want anything to do with my brother either. Choking with indignation, the Grand Duke immediately took off chasing after Luna. Once the two siblings had run off ahead, Luna suddenly spoke up. Sister Hazel definitely likes Big Brother, you know. Luna, remember when the snow creatures showed up? She even said he looked really handsome. The girl murmured that to herself, staring out the window all alone. The Grand Duke had no idea that at the time, he'd been covered head to toe in the blood of those snow creatures. And yet Sister Hazel had still thought he looked incredibly cool like that. Seeing his face flush red, little Luna smirked teasingly. Big brother, you're blushing. Luna, don't go around telling people about this. Which part? That Sister Hazel called you handsome, or that you blushed when you heard it? Either one. If you tell anyone, you won't get to eat Sister Hazel's baked treats for the next 6 months. And so quietly, the Grand Duke had fallen head over heels in love. The next day, he received an invitation to a ball from the Crown Prince. Looking at the seal stamped in green wax, the Grand Duke's mind immediately jumped to the color of Hazel's eyes. It seemed the rumors about witches being able to bewitch people's hearts were true after all. Right up until the day of the ball, the Grand Duke's eyes never once strayed far from Hazel. The knight Daniel had to practically talk himself hoarse trying to convince him. Tonight is the perfect chance to finally put an end to those rumors about the witch, you know. Please, just try to keep some distance from her throughout the whole event. The Grand Duke mumbled a vague agreement, but then immediately turned and asked, Do I look old to you? Thinking back to the very first time he came to that cottage to pick up his siblings, Hazel actually asked him if he was the children's father. The knight understood all too well. The Grand Duke was hopelessly, irrecoverably smitten. Back then, he was always frowning, sleep-deprived, barely touching his food. But now, all of that was gone. As much as I hate to admit it, my lord, you really are handsome enough to be infuriating. Just then, the Crown Prince suddenly called out to the Grand Duke. Well, well, I never expected you'd go through the trouble of traveling all this way in person. To attend this ball, that must have been quite the ordeal for you. After an exchange of painfully fake pleasantries between the two men, a woman slowly stepped forward. It's truly an honor to meet you, my lord. I'm Bella. The thing was, the Grand Duke had already been completely infatuated with Hazel for who knows how long. So when he saw it was Lady Bella approaching, he offered nothing more than a polite, formal bow. As it happened, Hazel, standing not far off, had caught the entire scene. Just as she turned to walk away, someone suddenly called out and stopped her. I hear you're Hazel, is that right? A witch has no business climbing her way into the seat of Grand Duchess. That position belongs to Lady Bella Kerr. Hazel, cornered by these noble young ladies, had absolutely no idea what was going on. What kind of nanny goes around whispering privately with the Grand Duke in the middle of a New Year's ball, anyway? Hazel quickly explained that she'd simply been fighting over some food, nothing more. To her surprise, the group switched tactics and started picking apart her outfit instead. This dress was a personal gift from His Highness himself. If it bothers you so much, go take it up with him. Even though this whole mess was actually the housekeeper's fault, all she could do now was use the Grand Duke as a shield. So if any of you have a problem, go complain to His Highness directly. Just as she turned to slip away quietly, she heard the two little ones' voices calling out from behind her. Sis, when do we get to go watch the fireworks? It was only then that Hazel realized with a start that the dance music had already begun without her noticing. She needed to get the children over to the Grand Duke right away. And yet, no matter how hard she searched, she couldn't spot him anywhere. Following Sir Victor's guidance, she finally found the Grand Duke dancing far off in the distance. In Hazel's eyes at that moment, the two of them made the perfect picture of a handsome man and a beautiful woman. Without realizing it, she stood there staring blankly, forgetting entirely to hide the sadness creeping across her face. Remembering the fireworks display coming up soon, she asked Sir Victor to keep an eye on the children for a moment. To her surprise, Sir Victor seized the opportunity and asked her to dance instead. The knight Daniel, standing behind them, caught the entire scene and made sure to call out a reminder that they should stay well away from the Grand Duke. And just like that, Hazel found herself pulled, dazed, onto the middle of the dance floor. The two of them danced and laughed together amid the crowd, but the very next moment, a heavy, oppressive shadow suddenly loomed over her. Your shoelace has come undone. Seeing the Grand Duke striding toward them, Sir Victor quickly took the hint and made a swift exit. Realizing she couldn't avoid him, Hazel figured she might as well use the moment to slip away out of sight herself. But just as she lifted her foot to make her escape, she tripped right over the loose shoelace and nearly fell. In that heart-stopping instant, the Grand Duke reached out and caught her cleanly. "Didn't I warn you to watch out for tripping? Where did that warning go?" Not only that, he even lowered himself to personally kneel down and retie her shoelace for her. By then, her face had turned as red as a tomato. She stammered out a quick thank you and urged him to hurry back to his place. Shouldn't I prove that I'm a far better dance instructor than Victor? Weak-hearted, Hazel found herself nodding along, but then suddenly remembered all the gossip that would surely erupt if she dared dance with the Grand Duke. So she firmly refused instead. A prince should only ever dance with a princess, not with a wicked witch straight out of a fairy tale like me. From the very start, I was never meant to be the heroine of this story anyway. A little while later, the sky lit up brilliantly with bursts of fireworks outside the castle. And yet, at that moment, the Grand Duke seemed strangely distracted, his mind clearly somewhere else entirely. The knight's earlier warning to keep his distance from Hazel still echoed in his ears. But the instant he saw her dancing with someone else, he forgot everything else completely. He understood full well what it meant to be a Grand Duke. His family needed to form an alliance with a ducal house outside the Emperor's faction, while also maintaining strong military and financial power. Looking back on everything that had happened, Hazel really should have hated him by now. And yet her expression from earlier, combined with what Luna had said, left him unable to stop turning it all over in his mind. Or perhaps he'd simply misunderstood what Luna had meant. Just then, the night sky suddenly lit up with a burst of rabbit-shaped fireworks. Even though Hazel and the Grand Duke stood in two entirely different spots, his eyes never once left her. As for Luna and Luca, both children longed with all their hearts to become a real family with Hazel. Before bed, the two little ones kept marveling over and over. Those rabbit-shaped fireworks tonight were absolutely amazing. So pretty. Seeing how thrilled the children were, Hazel promised she'd set off fireworks for them again on their next birthday. But for now, it's bedtime. So does that mean we don't get to sleep with Sister Hazel tonight? Knowing full well it was all because of the nanny rulebook, the two little mouths pouted and started grumbling about their brother. So uptight, no wonder he's still single with no girlfriend or wife to this day. Hazel quickly soothed them. Who knows, maybe soon your brother will bring Lady Bella from the ducal family home with him. I think she and His Highness would make a wonderful match. But in my eyes, Big Brother and Sister Hazel make the best match of all. Besides, it seems like he likes you too. Hearing that, Hazel's face flushed bright red. Doesn't your brother always tease me relentlessly? It's probably just that everyone feels comfortable around each other, that's all. Yes, that must be it. Anyway, I really hope you two can get along well with Lady Bella, okay? But Luna immediately brushed that off. I just want Big Brother to marry you. That's the only way we'd really become a true family. Oh, come on, I thought we were already family. It seemed that wasn't quite what Luna meant, and the girl hurriedly explained that wasn't what she'd intended at all. A little while later, both children had drifted off into a deep sleep. Hazel found herself thinking back to what Luna had said earlier. The girl had assumed Hazel hated her brother and had promised never to bring it up again if that were true. In truth, even Hazel herself wasn't entirely sure what her own heart wanted right now. Just last year, all she'd ever wished for was a single friend. Lost in thought, she suddenly jumped, startled to find the Grand Duke standing right there at the door. The air between them grew awkward and stifling, until finally the Grand Duke broke the silence. I was disrespectful toward you today, and I want to apologize. About what happened at the ball, you don't need to apologize to me at all. If anything, it was you who saved me, and you very nearly got hurt because of it. After that, the two of them fell back into stilted small talk, fumbling for something, anything, to say. Seeing me just now must have startled you, huh? Having someone suddenly appear outside your door in the middle of the night would scare anyone. Especially given how devastatingly handsome I am. You must freeze up every single time you look at me. If there's nothing else, I should head back to my room. You should get some rest soon too, Your Highness. Oh, and the kids were begging earlier to sleep with me tonight. If you get a chance, maybe consider loosening up that nanny rulebook a little. With that, Hazel shut the door firmly behind her. In her past life, she'd once been an obsessive fan, chasing after her idol with everything she had. But even then, she'd never once fantasized about actually dating them. The feelings she had for the Grand Duke now were probably just the same kind of fondness you'd feel for an idol. This pounding heart of hers would surely calm down soon enough. A witch like her could never hope to be worthy of someone as noble as a Grand Duke. Once these feelings faded, it would all be over, and she'd be free of it. No matter how much she told herself that, she couldn't explain why her heart kept filling with such an aching, hollow emptiness.